Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, May 20th, 2020, and I just wanted to update you guys a little bit about the Veep stakes for the Joe Biden presidential election campaign. Pretty much Gretchen Whitmer recently said that she has had an open discussion with the Joe Biden campaign about possibly being a vice presidential nominee. The interesting thing about this is the fact that Gretchen Whitmer a couple of months ago said that she was not going to be the Democratic nominee. She said that with almost 100% certainty, and it just seemed back then that they had already decided who the Democratic vice presidential nominee was going to be, and that they were waiting until the primary was absolutely over. Well, President Donald Trump obviously is running with Vice President Mike Pence, so there isn't much speculation on the GOP side. There were some discussions on, random websites discussing whether or not Donald Trump would replace Mike Pence. That is very unlikely for an incumbent president to do so. Donald Trump is not FDR, and he's also not serving a third and fourth term, so he's not really needing to switch vice presidential nominees. But things always like to run in the media, and they tend to pick up things such as that. But on the Democratic side, it is a much more prominent issue when you look at all of the candidates that are possibly on the list. Obviously, the clear frontrunner right now, based off what Democrats want, is Elizabeth Warren. So right now, I'm going to talk about Senator Kamala Harris because she seems like the best pick out of all of them based off of what the mainstream media is portraying. But Senator Elizabeth Warren actually has the number one highest approval rating amongst all of the VP possible nominees. And also, it looks like the plurality of Democrats want Elizabeth Warren to be the VP nominee. That's likely just because of the Bernie Sanders base that wants a progressive voice on the ticket, and Senator Harris would 100% not offer that. Sure, she does hold some positions that would classify her as, left-wing, but I don't necessarily think that people should consider her a progressive. When I considered Kamala Harris a presidential candidate, I pretty much gave all of her supporters to Vice President Biden if she was to drop out, which she ended up doing in December, I believe. But when she did drop out, it was important because, a lot of those supporters did end up going to Joe Biden, and they weren't necessarily progressive voters. Senator Harris wasn't really a part of that camp, whereas Elizabeth Warren definitely was. And Elizabeth Warren would offer a different point of view, but Senator Harris is, a black woman. She is someone who offers a very big contrast to the stereotypical old white man that pretty much we've seen in every single president besides Obama. Not necessarily the old part, but white men have pretty much run this country for, literally the entirety of the country. And, that has caused the Democratic Party to push for a change in the sense that they want their presidential or vice presidential nominee to not be standard, meaning they don't want them to be a white man. And that's the whole thing about this entire change. And the fact is, whether or not the country's ready for it doesn't really matter. There is going to be a woman nominee for the vice president's campaign as vice president. That's weird to say. And, if they elect Joe Biden, we will have the first ever woman vice president. And, history was either going to be made in 2016 or it was going to be made now. But that's all dependent on whether or not Biden wins. When I look at this list, I'm starting to see a very clear trend. Senators. They seem to be one of the most popular picks for the vice presidential nominee. There's Gretchen Whitmer, a governor who I will talk about the importance of having a governor on the ticket, New Mexico governor Stacey Abrams, and then another senator. Tammy Duckworth, a number of senators or congresswomen that are on this list. And, that poses a huge threat to the Democratic Party. Though they do have a number of possibilities to gain the Senate, to win the Senate in 2020, giving up a Senate seat, regardless of how safe Democratic the state you think it might be, gives the Republican Party the possibility of winning. For example, Massachusetts, after Obama had won, Massachusetts right now is the most Democratic state in the entire country based off voting margin and based off congressional districts as well, based off the amount they have and how many Democrats they have in the House of Representatives. And it is very, very, very Democratic. And, the Democratic Party lost a special election to a Republican in 2009, I believe. It was a big deal because a Republican won in Massachusetts for the first time in a very long time, or at least for the modern political stage. It wasn't really necessary for the Democrats to take that race seriously. At least it shouldn't have been. It's Massachusetts. They could have just fielded pretty much any Democrat in an election now if this was a midterm or general election, and they would have won. Pretty much anyone who is the Democrat in Massachusetts, whether you're running for House or Senate, you win your election. There's never really a competitive race. But the Republicans ended up winning it. So when you look at these states, sure, Tammy Duckworth is from Illinois. But as of recently, meaning 2016 was the last time they had a Republican incumbent in Illinois. And you wouldn't even want to start about throwing in a senator to the VP office from Wisconsin. That takes Tammy Baldwin completely out of the scenario. Possibly even Tammy Duckworth, who I think would be an amazing vice presidential choice, but it's just the fact you're giving up one Senate seat that could be crucial to the President Biden's agenda if elected, which is why I'm referring him as that, because that's what this entire video is about. But if Vice President Biden is elected and would, of course, be President Biden, one Senate seat could 100% change the outcome of the laws that are being passed and pretty much just make the entire administration stagnant. The Democratic Party needs to gain 4 seats in order to have an outright majority. Then they can really not worry about who the VP is. But that's the problem. You see, they don't know how many seats they're going to win going in before the election. And I honestly don't think that the Joe Biden campaign is going to be, super comfortable picking someone who could jeopardize the entire administration. Taking a Midwestern VP would give the Biden campaign an absolute certainty of winning the Rust Belt. They win the election, but then they could lose the Senate. And what good is an election without the Senate? I mean, sure, Obama did deal with 6 years of a Republican House and 2 years of a Republican Senate, but you did see that during those first 2 years was the only time period in which Obama actually was able to push forward notable legislation. And it caused, a number of senators to have to pull things. For example, for the Obamacare, they had to make a number of conservative concessions to the Democrat in Nebraska who was worried about pretty much making their constituents angry. And obviously, you have to deal with that when you're talking about a very close Senate, and you would have to make a number of concessions. And even if the Republicans lose the majority, you're still going to have to work with conservative Democrats in conservative states, for example, Joe Manchin in West Virginia. Losing one Senate seat is something that I honestly think would be one of the worst things for the Biden campaign, hands down. I, honest to God, think that when we're looking at who should be the vice presidential choice, I do not think it should be any senator except for possibly Elizabeth Warren and Senator Kamala Harris. Tammy Baldwin, Tammy Duckworth, Amy Klobuchar, while amazing candidates for the vice presidential choice, would do tremendous things for the Biden campaign, almost certainly win them a Senate seat. Catherine Cortez Masto as well would 100% win them the presidential election with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. But unfortunately, they would have to give up a Senate seat that's competitive. Elizabeth Warren, Massachusetts probably won't go to a Republican even in a special election. California definitely won't because they have that little jungle primary system, and I can almost guarantee 2 Democrats will be at the top, and even, Gavin Newsom might run for that Senate seat, wanting to serve in the Senate instead of the governor's mansion, but that's all up to him if that does end up happening. But Senator Harris, I honestly think, is the only senator where the Democratic Party does not really have to worry about losing a Senate seat. When you look at the possibilities of Gretchen Whitmer and Michelle Lujan Grisham, I think those are pretty notable options. Recently I came across this point that makes a lot of sense to me. During this entire time period, governors have been the most impactful on the American electorate, 100%. Most people didn't know their governor. I can say that at least pretty confidently. First of all, half the people don't vote. 120 million people sat at home last time. 200, I don't know. It's just a lot of people did not vote in the 2016 presidential election. A lot of people don't vote in governor's races if it's in an off year, if it's in 2019, if it was in 2018, if it was in 2017. Governors have had a direct impact on us as a result of the coronavirus. Gretchen Whitmer has made a name for herself because of her handling of the coronavirus. Whether or not that's through banter with Donald Trump, the mainstream media has picked her up and loved her. The same can't be said for Michelle Lujan Grisham, who was recently elected in 2018, as was Gretchen Whitmer. But Gretchen Whitmer has definitely made a lot more of a name for herself on the nationwide level. Americans definitely will recognize her name over someone else from the governor of New Mexico. But I do think that picking a governor might be a very important step for the Biden campaign. In a time where governors have a direct impact on us and have seen the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on its citizens directly and learned how to lead through such a very unfortunate scenario, I honestly think that a governor may be a pretty safe bet. Usually, you would pick a senator, you would pick someone who ran for president, for example, Senator Kamala Harris, but for Gretchen Whitmer, I mean, she offers a lot of the same qualities, and the only thing they would really have to worry about is who would fill in that vacancy if it's the lieutenant governor, and then it goes to a special election if that happens. Not entirely sure about how New Mexico and Michigan would go about that process, but it's a lot less risky and a lot less impactful on the Biden agenda if you choose a governor. It's a lot safer of a bet, and I do think that it will resonate very well with the American electorate if you do choose someone who, first of all, can handle a response such as this, so they'll be prepared day one going into the vice president's office, and then, can report to Joe Biden directly, a national figure who may not have time to go and visit individual states, especially during this pandemic, and tell them how citizens reacted to certain proposals and how to work with both sides of the aisle in order to agree on a compromise to help the citizens of their state. And I think Gretchen Whitmer and Michelle Lewin Grisham offer a very good possibility for that. Stacey Abrams is still in the running for, I guess, vice president, but, she's pretty much been campaigning on it by herself. That's something that you see in the media a lot. Pretty much Stacey Abrams just talking back and forth with talking about whether or not she wants to be the vice presidential nominee, how great she would be as the vice presidential nominee. I honestly think the Biden campaign should look into it. But, I definitely think there are stronger candidates for the vice president at this choice. Val Demings is on the list as well. Susan Rice, I think, would be really interesting. Sally Yates, and let's see if that's it. So that's pretty much it in terms of the short list that CBS News has recently reported as of, I think it's actually yesterday is when they released this list. So when I pretty much kick out a number of these senators from the possibility of being VP, the Biden campaign might take the risk. They very well may want to just secure the Rust Belt while choosing a senator and give up that one Senate seat for a special election and hope the Democrats win it. But I think they're going to try to play it smart. They might end up choosing Senator Harris, Senator Warren, Governor Whitmer, and Governor Grisham, but pretty much it's probably going to narrow down to those four. I really don't see... I mean, I don't know if Stacey Abrams would be the best pick. She hasn't really held any nationwide type public office, not a representative or a senator. And the issue of experience would come up 100%. And right after she had lost her election, she moved over into making speeches that could be perceived as the same way as Hillary Clinton's Goldman Sachs type speeches. So I really think that the Biden campaign might try to just play it smart on both the Senate level and the vice presidential level because they can 100% win with any of these women. I'm telling you that now. It's not dependent on who the VP nominee is going to be. They could win with any of them. And I think if they truly want to play it safe, they should go with Senator Harris or Governor Whitmer. But that's just my 2 cents on the topic. I think that the Biden campaign has a lot more vetting to do and a lot more interviewing to do to figure out whether or not they're going to actually choose any of the women even on the short list. And I think that we will find out soon enough. Hopefully, I don't know exactly when the Biden campaign said they were going to release it, but they said sometime soon. So I don't really know that time frame, but I'm hoping it's before the end of June. That way, once they hit the convention in August, virtual convention, I think, convention in August, we will all know who the vice presidential nominee is going to be. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all tomorrow.